sure there are questions. I myself have a few, but I'll come back to that later. So with that, I'll invite the next speaker. Now we have Professor Sushobhan Avasthi from CeNSE, IISc. Professor Avasthi completed his BTech from in electrical engineering from IIT Kanpur and obtained his PhD in electrical engineering from Princeton, US. At the beginning of COVID-19, it was anticipated that in case of severe infections, patients would need ventilators. Professor Avasthi and his team have developed a low-cost ventilator. Let's hear about that fascinating story.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. So yeah, can we use industrial components to make a ventilator? Okay, so that was the goal, and then we started. And this was the initial team. It all started with a call from Akshay, who basically we were all sitting at home. IC had just closed down. He said, "Yeah, kuch karna hai." And Vasu was the chair. He was fine. Let's coordinate a team of the willing. Vasu knew Justin through a parent-teacher meeting connect. He lives in Manipal. He works in Manipal, so they both have their kids go to the same school. So Justin came on board. Manjunath is a collaborator for Solves. He helps us build some of the semiconductor equipment I was talking about, and these are the students who again just said yes. They didn't have to. They did. It was lockdown times. We had no components. So we just got whoever came online. Somebody did the coding. Somebody did this and that. We got some funding of 10 lakhs from SID through the Nidhi Prayas program. And this was the first technical meeting. Vasu just jotted it down. This is his handwriting, like this is what we are going to make. You would notice something. This is a very industrial design. There is very little medicine here. And as you will see, that was a mistake. So anyways, there are lots of stories. I broke the lockdown rules through taking narrow streets in Bangalore and got things from SP Road. A lot of the deals happened behind closed shutters because police were roaming the streets and all the invoices were post-dated because they couldn't actually sell us anything during those days. But finally, through some scavenging and rummaging, we were able to get enough things. We couldn't find some very critical equipment like oxygen sensors, pressure sensors. So all of these were actually donated by many labs in IISc. And again, I think the scientific community really came together. And finally, we built this, what we call the D0 prototype. All of this took test 2 days. And again, at that point, we were feeling very confident. We were like, yeah, we still don't understand ventilator costs and labs. We didn't understand what a ventilator does either. So this is a system that can fill this bag with air and remove the bag of air, but this is not a ventilator. Fact of the matter is no doctor would ever use this cooler system in a real human being. In order to make this a ventilator that actually works, you need alarms, you need professional interface, you need standard connections, you need certifications, you need to follow many rules. And for that, we actually had to expand the team. It was a learning process for us that, look, it's not just enough to build something that is positive and negative. There are a lot of ventilators during those days using tires and this and that, and none of that ever made any sense in hindsight, but at that point it was pretty exciting. So we had to understand what it takes. So we got people like Anup, who runs a medical company. He actually told us, look, these are the certifications. This is how you design for failure. This is how you design for safety. We had to get people from the electrical engineering who told us how to run a good control system. So actually, you don't cause pressure spike that can kill a patient. We got electronics engineers from the electrical department who actually made professional looking PCB boards that don't look like an octopus, but actually look like a system. And then expanded the support team to even larger. And all of this, after 2 months, got us to this point, which is what we call the D1 prototype. Basically had an interface, it has some buttons, you can control things in a reasonable fashion. It has standard medical connections that can actually go and attach themselves to a hospital. It was a dabba, and that is kind of important. And there were sensors, computer controls, and most important of them all, it had alarms. Finally, you could actually talk to doctors in a reasonable fashion. And we were very happy. But unfortunately, it was June 2020. And then there's a gap between a prototype and a production. This is something, again, we learned the hard way. The fact that you have a prototype that does what you need does not mean you have a system that is ready for production, testing, or certification. And I'll give you some very specific examples of those. But then COVID receded, and so did the interest. Very bluntly speaking, our labs opened, all of us got busy. Neither IISc nor VASMED nor CAS could actually spare the resources to continue to make it from that prototype into a dabba. It also seemed India had won the COVID battle. Cases are falling. You see titles like these on the, I think we had mission accomplished by February 2021. India's fight against COVID was going to be the way apparently pandemics had to be handled and the world should learn from us. Ventilators from Bell and Agua had been made and they were actually sitting in Bell waiting for customers and nobody needs ventilators anymore. So we are done. So we also stopped it. But then the wave 2 struck. And I think it humbled a lot of people. The cases started rising again and it was far more severe. We got a call from Manipal actually in Feb end from Justin. He said, remember that ventilator 6 months ago? If you still have it in your lab, just deliver it just in case we need it. And then I actually myself lost my father on April 12th, COVID. It was actually on the taxi ride way back. Then I had the first phone call again of the whole team and said, let's take this up again. I mean, it's quite one thing to have this image on a newspaper, it's quite another to be there, and I was there. Okay, so finally we got the CSR funding from Western Digital. That was crucial. Again, I agree with him. BSc, ICMS funding just take too far too long. We got CSR funding. Supriya was a friend. She helped a lot. Thank you for that, Supriya. She now has moved on to other things, but then she was the country head of Western Digital. She also paid actually for the 20 production units, which is very important. You have to going from product, getting that pilot production started is extremely crucial. So what is it, the difference? I said, I'll tell you about the difference between a prototype and a production variant. You have to replace jugaad with real components. Indians pride themselves on jugaad. Unfortunately, jugaad is not manufactured. Okay. Jugaad doesn't work. Jugaad only makes for good headlines and feel good Twitter feeds. It is not manufactured. There's no point in making something whose supply chain is unknown. All right. And if there is a commercial component, use it. The famous Vasu story is when you start cooking, you don't start by sowing the seed. You go to the grocery store and you purchase the groceries. So that's what we did. We basically replaced a lot of things which we could not source. So we had done jugaad. For example, we couldn't actually get these commercial sensors during the lockdowns. So we had just built our own. It works, but that is not what you would use. We used our own oxygen sensor. It works, but this is not what you would use. You have to then start managing supply chain. You had a design, you had an electronic design, the board worked, but is it manufacturable? For that, when we started looking in, can you actually get 20, 50, or 100 of these components? The answer for many of those components was no. There was an IC shortage going on. It was pretty severe in 2021. So we actually had to make changes in the design, not based on what we want, but based on what we can actually get. People in the industry would call that managing supply chain. We were just learning it on the go. For example, we started using these two Infineon chips, and they were just out of production. We actually had to contact Infineon Bangalore, and thanks to Girish, who actually got 50 numbers just for us, delivered straight from France for free. Professional valves are apparently not available in India. It just so happened that Festo, which is actually a German company, they were just going into the production of making this, and we were, I think, one of their first customers. We were also their testers and their first customers. Normally open valves, they were not available in India of the right specifications. UFlow is an Indian company. They were indigenizing it at that point in time. They were actually supplying these valves to the BL ventilator. And after the BL ventilator, I think they were the second customers. So all of these things sort of become important when you're making that productionized version. We then have to get certification. This is actually the image of the police permission slip that I had to give the guy who actually took the ventilator because it was another lockdown going on. But we finally got the initial performance specification, third-party certification that the ventilator actually worked. And you cannot forget the silly stuff when you're trying to get certified. I'll mention 3 words, and all of these are laughable. User manual, signages, and trolley. What? Ventilator is important. These are not. Turns out you cannot get certification with all of these 3 things in place. There are rules there, and those rules are there for a reason. And if you're trying to make a product, you actually have to be sensitive to all those details. We actually, 2 days before the testing, we were not scrambling to build the ventilator. We were scrambling to find somebody to print the labels. But finally, we assembled in working configurations, and then this is what the ventilator finally looks like. Now, this looks like a system. This looks like a system. This looks like a technology. This is something you can give someone to mass manufacture. And I mentioned a lot about teams and getting help from people, but I will also highlight the champions. End of the day, you need those 1 or 2 people that really drive the project. And in this case, it was Harsha and Ankit. They were both PhD students. They both have graduated now, but I'm fairly certain the graduation was delayed by 6 to 8 months because they invested time in this. And thank you for that. But finally, we had a system that had all the mandatory alarms, all the mechanical safety, a touch screen that doctors can actually use, a compact form factor, and it has actually been designed for manufacturability, scalability, and serviceability. These are the technical features. If you're not in the medical field, this may not make much sense. So let's ignore those. Let's look at the case, what we ended up finally getting made. So a balance of materials finally came down to 2 lakhs. So our initial guess was not too off. You can actually make a ventilator worth 2 lakhs, but only that is the BOM cost, which is the cost of putting the components and putting it together. Once you add certification, other things, the cost goes up. but it's still significantly cheaper than the imported alternatives and also the indigenous ones. That's where we stand. This is actually when the fan system got tested in Manipal. You see it's connected to their manifold. And yeah, so the oxygen in there, and it's not connected to a patient here, it's just connected to their test system. So they wanted to make sure it works. And yeah, sure enough, it works. They got a lot of pressure along with it, and with that, we finally were able to transfer the TO2 to two companies, TOT to Apollo and Basmet. For whatever reason, Apollo did not take it forward, and that also happens. So this was free TOT. There was no money. It was all given for free. But that doesn't mean everybody's going to do it. There's 4 or 5 people talked to us about it. 2 took TOT, and 1 actually put it into production. Okay. Basmet has at this point manufactured 20 ventilators in a pilot plant. They have passed the full IEC 606 2-12, which is for safety, performance, CMI-MC. They have to go for C certification if they have to export it. That is a whole bag of worms that takes 2 years. They are planning to do this after they have gotten some feedback from hospital. At this point, they're supplied to 3 hospitals, and they're seeking interest from other hospitals to sort of take it forward. Which brings us to, but we still need to sell, which is the last hurdle and frankly the hardest one. The fact that you made something, the fact that it looks good, and the fact that it's useful still doesn't mean that there is a market for it and that you can sell it. You have to actually define and satisfy a market, and that is a completely separate battle. That is, in my opinion, way harder than engineering. To be very fair, what we have done is we made a ventilator. So the way the ventilator market works, it's usually used in an ICU. Now, the best hospitals out there, well, Manipal would be one of those in large metro cities. Their cost of running an ICU or setting up an ICU or 25-bed ICU probably runs into a few crores. In that budget of a few crores, ventilator is a percentage. They're not willing to compromise by buying a cheaper alternative. They rather buy the greater. Okay? No matter how much you convince them with data. That's just the reality, and I understand their reality. They have to satisfy their own market. If you go down from the tier 1 hospitals to go to tier 2 and tier 3 hospitals, let's start with tier 3. Tier 3 do not have an ICU period. They don't even have basic stuff. They don't even have a doctor who can use a ventilator, so they have no business buying a ventilator. That leaves you with this tier 2, where you're trying to find a price-sensitive ICU bed. We have not found one yet. All right. Maybe there's one out there, but we as an investment have not found one yet. Okay, and that's what I mean. You have to define the market. The fact that you have a low-cost ventilator doesn't automatically mean it will sell. Okay. All right. So learnings. So there's a lot of expertise in IISc. Just reach out and you will be surprised. I did not think that just through an email to my colleague, I'll suddenly find somebody who can do a GUI design, or I'll suddenly find somebody who knows as much coding as sort of did. Real problems require interdisciplinary teams. You need to learn to work with people. You have to sort of understand their language, and they need to understand your language. Very crucial. I think we were able to move fast and made the ventilator in 2 months because we figured out the language. You need allies. You need to learn about the market, users, and experts. So people like Justin and Anoop are very crucial. You can do papers in a lab, but if you want to really make a product, you have to go out there. Build early relationship with suppliers like Festo, Infinium. I can give you 100 examples of cases where a phone call helped. I've still not met half of these people, right? It was just a phone call, but you have to make those phone calls. And funding is crucial. We cannot ignore people like DSC and also these new avenues like CSR. Prototyping is easy, engineering is hard, productization is very hard, and manufacturing and selling is crazy hard. You must invest in the long haul. It's actually one of the reasons why IISc does a lot of good science, but very little social impact. And timing matters. There are really no price of being a penny short and a day late. We were always a day late. Had we actually delivered the D3 right before phase 2 or right before the second wave, this would actually be a much successful product. We are a few months too late, and that's something I will now remember. And real solution is really a feat of just engineering. You need marketing, operations, finance, supply chain. So build a team. In this case, for example, when the final ventilator got done, we went around the room and said, anybody wants to do a startup on this? And nobody raised their hand. And the fact is, that is why we are here, right? We're sort of waiting on investment and waiting on others to take it forward. You need a team to do things, and you need a champion to take it to a lot of different people. You need that one person to raise their hand, say, I will get everything done. So yeah, thank you. So if you have any questions, you can email me, but yeah, that's the story.